And that's not the comp I want. Let's make a new composition. I want a 1920 by 1080 just to yeah, do a 1920 by 1080. That'll work. About 10 seconds long. All right. So particle systems are in effect. So they're found under our effects and presets. And if we type start typing, I do a terrible job of typing. Particles, you'll see that here under simulation, we've got 3 different options. I'm really only going to look at 2 of them because they're, this one doesn't get as much use. Particle Systems 2 and Particle World are practically identical, with the difference being that Particle World works in 3D space and works with 3D cameras, and Particle Systems 2 is a 2-dimensional kind of a thing. But the settings are, so I'm going to start with Particle Systems 2 because the settings are all the same in Particle World, and then Particle World just has a few more. So these are the 2 I'm going to focus on. They are effects. You got to have something to add them to in your scene. And it doesn't really matter what you add them to for the most part, although with one of my examples it will. But for the most part, I can just go and add layer, new, and just add a solid to my scene. It doesn't even matter what color it is. It won't have any effect. And then I'm just going to grab Particle Systems 2 and drop it on top of it, and it goes away because it takes over that shape. So when I do that, under my effect controls, you see I've got all of these different settings. And I think it's easier probably if I just start playing this and kind of explain what it is what we're looking at, and then I'll kind of show you how all of these relate to that. So I'm just going to start, like I said, it's a 10-second composition. Tap play on my keyboard. Right out of the box, there we go. So this particular particle system is the default. And basically it's using little lines for the particles themselves. And the lines themselves, I mean, these will render. We can render these, but usually when we do particle systems, we want to have something a little more specific, something a little more solid. But this gives me I can kind of explain what's going on with this. So the first thing is, all of our particles, you'll notice, are emanating out of a central point. And particles have to come from somewhere. So this central point is referred to as the producer. And if we take a look over here in our effects settings, producer is a category. And on this 2D one, we can affect position and the radius of it. I'm going to leave those alone for right now, but that's our producer, and that's how it translates into our settings. So this is where they come from. If I'm creating, say, a snow system or a rain system, I probably want a producer that's not a tiny little dot like that. I can scale the width of this up, or I can scale the height of it, whatever I need to do. So that's the producer. The little yellow, and actually as they get further out here, they turn red. The yellow to red lines themselves are the actual particles. And you change anything you want to about those, the physical characteristics of those particles, over here within the particles section. And there's a bunch of those, along with a bunch of different particle types. So I'm just going to leave it at lines for right now, but that's where we change the way those look physically. You'll notice also that they're yellow. They start out as yellow, and as they get further away, they get red. It's not the distance that they're getting from the producer, it's actually the lifespan of the particle. All particles have a lifespan, and we have complete control over that. But the color you see is determined by the values of its birth color and its death color. So its depth color right now is set to red. So as it gets further away out here over time, it starts to turn orange and then turns red and then it disappears. So that's what the yellow to red color is. And we can change that as well. Obviously, we got settings over here. They're all animatable. So that's, very 30,000 foot view of the particle itself. But if we kind of take a look down through here, I mentioned that we have a birth rate or birth color and a death color. And that's based upon its longevity. And right now this is set for the lifespan of a particular particle is 2 seconds. And I can change that. If I drop this down to, let's just drop it to a second. You see it's not as dense. If I slide it even further down, it becomes just very sparklish. It's like a sparkler. The higher I move it, the denser it gets. And I could go beyond 4. I just got to put it up here in the value field. 8, 12. And you notice that, the longer longevity, I don't really see the red anymore. It's yellow for longer. So that's how long they live. And then up here is their birth rate. And it's set to 4 by default. That's a fraction of a second. I'm thinking it's a tenth of a second, 4 particles in a tenth of a second. I don't know that 100% for sure. But what I do know is if I slide this down, I have fewer particles being born. And if I slide it up, I got a boatload more particles being born. So I can control all that kind of stuff. If I set this back to 4, it'd be great. So these all affect each other though. So for instance, if I have fewer particles, it doesn't have a big effect here. Let's say I've got fewer particles, but I increase my longevity. Not as big an effect there. It'll be more when I get to the physics. One affects the other, though, generally speaking. These two, not so much, but you'll see the difference as I move on. But those are particles. They live for a period of time. We control that. They have we can apply different characteristics to them, color, all that kind of stuff. Even different sort of emission styles. Right now, this is the emitting via an animation setting called explosive, which means basically they're all exploding out from the middle of it. But there are other settings from that. So we've got the particles. The last thing we're kind of looking at here is, if you notice, as they're born, they drop. And that's because physics also apply to particles. So right now, gravity is affecting them, dragging them down. I can adjust that gravity. Also, there's also like atmospheric resistance that we can use to affect them as well. So there's that, there's velocity, a variety of other physics settings. Those are all found here under this nifty category called physics. And you see we've got velocity, inherent velocity, gravity, resistance, direction, and some extra stuff. Extras are only do anything based upon certain other settings, but these are the physics of it. So I mentioned, it's using an animation style referred to as explosive, and that's what's set here. But if I change this to twirl, they all sort of spin. We've got one called Twirly. I don't know if they were running out of names or what the deal was. It twirls, but in a tighter pattern. I think if you really kind of look closely, they kind of cross a little bit more. It's a little more random. Vortex, more of a tornado kind of a thing. Fire, we'll look at that a little closer in a minute. And it's just sort of a spinning sort of fire vortex kind of a thing. And then we've got directions and jet sideways. Jet sideways happens actually when we move it. Actually, I don't think if it's not playing, I'll have to animate it to show you, but yeah, we'll do that. I'll do that later. So these kinds of settings we can change for the way that it emits. All of our physics settings have an effect on it. So if let's just go back to explosive. Play that. So let's take a look at gravity first, because it's the most obvious one. If I lower the gravity, you'll notice that they all rise. And if I raise the gravity, it pulls them down in a tighter kind of pattern. If I change gravity from 2 to 6, say, even tighter yet. And the gravity's stronger, so they're actually moving faster. Gravity's affecting the speed of that. I'm going to bring this back over here. And then the next one I'm going to take a quick look at is resistance. Resistance will affect the pattern of the particles as well as their movement. So it's set to 0 right now, but if I pull it up here to about 2, notice that resistance is kind of pulling them into a tighter pattern, and they're also moving slower at the same time. So I'll just kind of crank this up a little farther. And actually, so we can see everything that's going on better, I'm going to go back up here to my producer, click on this, and then stop. Over, crying out loud. Grab that target so that I can then just sort of drag it down here a little bit. So now when it plays, we see it living and dying as they. So let's see, producer. Let's close that up. And I've got my resistance cranked up. Gravity's kind of cranked up. I could lower that a little bit. So I've got it moving slower. But what if I kind of like the pattern where it was taller? You know, it's like all these things compressed what's going on. You know, so this is where I say every setting you change usually requires the change of another setting in some way, shape, or form. So I can make these particles last longer. Right now they're only lasting for basically 2 seconds. If I increase their duration to 3 or 4, notice now they're on screen longer. They live longer, so the time from birth to death takes longer. All of these settings affect each other. I mean, once you get to a certain point, especially when you're working with the physics aspects, when you make a change to one setting, you're usually going back and adjusting others. So, and you know, I can, you know, affect the speed at which they emit that way. I can speed this up, you know, in a similar way. So, I'm going to leave that there. I'm actually going to change this from explosive now, I think, to twirl. And velocity is basically the speed at which they come out of the producer. The faster they come out, though, the more they're going to spread. So if I crank up my velocity, it's throwing them further and wider. If I slow it down, it'll compress it even a little bit more. And maybe my birth rate should be a little lower. Not as many being born at a time. All settings that affect each other. Inherent velocity has to do, it's an interaction with the producer. If you animate the producer, as it moves, it'll leave particles behind that are birthed at one point in time, but as the producer moves away, some of those will kind of drag a little bit with them and give a little bit of, or if you go to the negative direction, it'll push them away. So we'll take a look at that when I start animating the producer. But right now, we've made a lot of changes to the particle system itself, and kind of given it a variety of different looks. So I'm going to leave those behind, the physics behind here for a little bit. The way the particle actually looks, though, is what makes the difference in the animation. So it's using line right now. There are a bunch of other settings down in through here that we can use. And if I change it to star, for instance, I now get a star kind of shape for each of my particles. If I change it from star to shaded sphere, turns all of my particles into a little ball that, or like a solid ball, basically, sphere that gets shaded as it reaches the edges, so a little bit of shadow to it. We've got faded, which is like a shaded sphere, except that it just fades to a zero opacity at the edges. But as you can see, as I start changing the particle itself, I'm starting to get things that look a little more useful to us, probably. And I really haven't gone very far with that yet. So it really just kind of gets better from this point. So faded sphere, shaded and faded is kind of a combination of the two. Bubble looks as you can imagine. But then there's a bunch of other different settings down through here that I'll move to a little bit later. But one thing that's important to know is that we don't have to use, as particles, we don't have to use the built-in stuff. We can create our own particles, and we can define those as being what the particle producer uses. And those settings are actually the textured tri-polygons and a textured quad polygon. Basically, those have if I select quad, I don't really have much of anything. It does have the birth and death color, but I can apply a texture. I can create another composition and apply it there, which I'll do in a little bit. But those are some of the settings. So I'm just going to go back up here to shaded sphere and move down through some more of these. So next is our birth size and our death size. The size of these particles as they are isn't the way they have to be left. We can have them be larger when they're born. And larger or smaller when they die. So I can make them, maybe I make them a little bigger when they're born, a little smaller when they die. I can make them bigger when they die. Depends on what I'm looking for. The volumes I'm starting to build out, though now, you can kind of see as being useful for things like billowing smoke clouds, that sort of thing. Colors aren't really right, but we can fix all that kind of stuff. So, the more I work with here, the more flexibility it appears I'm going to have and interesting things I can build. So the next one down, so those are our sizes for birth and death. Size variation basically is just saying it's at 50% right now. So if its birth size is 2, it's going to vary. Every particle will be within 50% of that size, either smaller or larger. So We can crank that number up. If we want something really random, we can make it, 100% variation. And we kind of see what we start to get. So I'll leave it there. I don't know what it'll give me, but we'll find out. So maximum opacity, right now they're all 75% translucent. We can make that 100% if we want. Make them a little denser for now. And then here's our color map. Birth to death, origin to death, and I'll show you origin to death in a moment. But if I want to change the colors of these, I'll just go in here and I'll make my birth color white, and I can make my death color maybe the death color is kind of a real nice blue of some kind. And then last but not least, the transfer mode. Composite just basically stacks one on top of the other. But if I change it to screen, now I start getting volumes that again look a little more useful to me. I can change my max opacity back down to 75, but maybe my birth size should be a little bit smaller. Maybe my death size can be bigger. You see, I'm really kind of starting to change. Compared to what we started with, I've got something totally different now. So let's make the death size a little smaller. Let's make this a little more smoky looking. And random seed, the very last. If I've got, if I create one particle system that I like, and I duplicate it, because I duplicate that particle system because I want multiples, they're still going to emit the exact same way, so they're going to look like twins whenever they animate. If I change the random seed, it'll change that animation style. So they won't be quite so much twins. You don't have to change them a whole lot. It just kind of randomizes that effect a little bit. So that's kind of a quick run through of all of the different settings. Keep in mind as well that it's an effect. Just like any other effect, we can stack effects on top of each other. So I'm going to go find a blur, because I can still kind of see all of those balls in there. It's like, yes, like it can work for some stuff, but for what I'm doing right now, I think I want to do something a little more fun. So I'm going to type blur, and I'm going to look down through here to CC vector blur. And I'm picking vector blur because particles are a calculated kind of a thing. You notice we're setting numbers for all these things, and it has different effects, and we adjust the numbers for even more different effects. So it's a calculated kind of a thing. Any of the vector effects are going to work on anything that's calculated. So if I just grab this, come over here, I'm going to drop it on top of my solid. I'll close up my particle system. So now I'm going to change the amount of blur. And it starts to blur what those look like. That's even better looking yet. So, I can, and there's a bunch of different settings in here, but if I change the ridge smoothness, should smooth off a little bit of that. Different settings, it's using natural right now, but I can do, direction fading. Isn't it kind of a wild kind of a look? Direction center, perpendicular, constant length. They're a little more of a standard blur kind of a look. So I think that's a little smokier probably, so I'd probably use that for smoke. But natural looks like a decent enough setting probably for something that's a fire or something to that effect. So I can stack other things on top of it. Roughen edges, I mean, any other effects, the sky is kind of the limit. So having done all of that, I'm gonna, let's take a look at some other things. So I'm gonna create a new composition. Oops. Create a new composition. And same size, 1920 by 1080. And I think what I want to do here is actually animate I'm going to animate the producer here. So I'm just going to grab one of my solids, doesn't matter. Oh, this time it does matter. Actually, I want to do one other thing first. So I have a photo in here that I grabbed earlier. And I said before that it doesn't matter what you place a particle system on, and it doesn't. But some things give us different effects when we do so. So if I'm just going to scale this down, and I'm going to apply my particle system to this. And the reason I'm going to do that is, if you remember, in my color mapping, one of the options was origin to depth or origin constant. This is the origin object. So if let's see, is that size pretty much the way I want it? Let's take a look. And a little more. All right. So I got that, and I'm just going to go back over here, toss particle system 2 on top of it. Okay. There. Now then, let's go back to black. So it's yellow now, this particle system is. But we'll go down here to my particle settings. Actually, let's do plant. Let's go to my physics, raise my resistance a little bit. Gravity, let's drop it. Make them live a little longer. And increase the birth rate. All right, let's try that. Then I'm going to come down here to my particles. Let's change it from line to faded sphere this time. And I'm going to change from birth to death to origin to death. You'll see my particle color change. The depth size stays the same though, or color stays the same. So the other option was origin constant, and that'll use that color for the particle over the life of it. And if I take this guy, let's grab our producer, position, let's start it here. Come across to 2 seconds. Bring it over here. See what we're starting to get. So come over to here. Take it up here. Over here. And at the end, I'm just going to grab that guy and paste him there. Actually, let's select all of these. Easy ease them. And let's make it so they zoom away from their starting point and slow into their second point. So zip those way over. So now as I watch this, my particles are changing color based upon that origin object. And as that producer moves, it kind of looks like it leaves a stream. And I'll just go ahead and kind of, let's lower our gravity just a little bit. Let's increase our resistance to tighten everything up. Maybe our producer should be smaller. Let's change it from 3 to 1.5. Change the birth size of our particles, make them a little bigger when they're born. Maybe not that big. It's using explosive right now, so maybe I change that to twirl. Let's see what that gives us. That kind of throws things out a little bit. I could decrease my velocity maybe. That'll tighten things up a little bit. And let's screen this. So we're starting to get things that are a little more interesting and a little more useful. I think my resistance is too high. Let's do that. Vortex. But all these settings kind of change the way they look. Fire. So, a little more interesting stuff. All right. So that's, I mean, the primary settings. If I want to, animate, I can animate the producer to a path. So just like I align items to path throughout After Effects, I can use the same process with the 2D one. The 3D, the particle world is it's more difficult to align to the producer to an object, to move it around the scene. It requires quite a bit of expression writing to do it, so I'm probably not going to do it, but we can real quick. All right, I'm doing good. So create another one. Go back to my project. Solids. Particle system 2. This time I'll just create real quick a deselect everything and just something like that. Adjust that a little bit. Let's Go into our, with that shape, we'll go into our contents, to the path, copy the path, and then I'll go here into my particle system, into the producer, select its position, paste. So my option, oops. Stretch that out a bit. Don't need that anymore. So I can align that, animate that to that path. Maybe I'll speed that up a little bit. And then I'm just kind of going in and making adjustments to my various settings to kind of particle. Let's change this to faded sphere. Instead of explosive, we'll grab fire maybe. Increase our burst size. See what we get with our resistance. Adjust the longevity a little bit. Let's go back here and grab our blur. Where'd he go? There he is. So, not too bad. So let's take a look at, after having done that, we're going to take a look at particle world, and let's look at the differences there. So, yeah. Oops. Wrong window. New composition. Particles, particle world. Need an object. Now let's drop it in there. All right, so the differences you can see right off the bat. Even though our settings look pretty much the same, with a little bit of an inclusion, our viewport has this floor, and you'll notice that our producer was a shape that we could actually adjust if we wanted to. We've still got all the same stuff. I mean, our producer, we just got more settings for him because it's a 3D object. So we've got that floor plane. We can utilize that, which I'm going to do in a moment. But otherwise, the settings are pretty much the same. Grids and guides simply give us the opportunity to turn on and off the grids that it shows us. So if we don't want to see all those, we can uncheck those and turn them off. They're still there, it's just we're not using them. So So with this, I'm going to actually use, I'm actually going to, if you notice my producer has this little halo around it, I can grab that and kind of stretch out the width of it. And I'm also going to just grab it in the middle and slide it up out of my viewport. So now when I play it, I've got stuff falling from the sky. So we'll leave that there for now. Let's go to particles. Let's change this to faded sphere. We'll go from white to maybe a light blue of some kind. I don't know, just for a little bit of variation. It's starting to look like a snowstorm in a way. Then it's really just kind of, I want to slow that down. So I think the easiest way to kind of do that is through my physics. Take a look at velocity, see what that'll make it drop a little straighter. But if I crank it up, it spreads them out a little bit, which actually I want because it's a 3D object. And if you kind of look closely, you can see some of these actually get closer to you. So we'll do that. And then I will change the resistance. I'll crank that way up. Slows them down. And get that out of my way. Longevity, we'll crank way up. A little slower, gentler kind of a fall. They're still dying towards the end. Don't really want that, so let's go 8. I've got a 10-second composition. We'll see how that works out. It's all really kind of uniform though. But I do have let's see, maybe instead of explosive, we actually use twirl. So that's sort of starting to introduce a little bit of variation. Maybe increasing the velocity might help that some. Starting to. Feels a little lazier. Maybe it's too much snow. Maybe I drop the birth rate down a little bit. Just sort of simulated for the most part. And then, so that'll work probably to start with. So remember we have this, I mentioned we've got a floor that we can work with here too. So let's stop this so we can look at this. Let's grab the floor and we're going to raise the floor up a little bit. And all the particles are going to be visible. I can change it from above the floor to below after the floor, but it's not really going to matter because I want to change the floor action from none to, let's change it to bounce to start with. That wasn't what I wanted. Didn't give me the result I wanted based upon all my settings. Let's do ice. When it hits that floor, it stops them, which is kind of nice. I want to increase the longevity to 12. So remember, it's a 3D object. If I go in here and add a camera to my scene, I'm just going to tap the 1 key on my keyboard. this through and then I'll stop it at some point. Let's see. There. Stop it there. Hit the 1 key on my keyboard, and I can orbit and work through that now. So I orbit, so I'm down at floor level. Now I'm above it, and kind of move inside of it. My objects get closer to me, so I've got that real sense of depth. More than just that to the 3D variation, but that's a good example of why we would use it. So let's pull back out a little bit, rotate up. I'm going long ways on it. So it's got some real nice depth, got stuff getting pretty close to me. I don't even have depth of field really enabled for the camera. It's just kind of doing it on its own. So using that as kind of a base. What time is it? Okay, doing good. Stop that. Save this. All right. The last one I'm going to do a variation on that, but I'm going to do bubbles this time. But I'm not going to use any of the built-in stuff as my bubbles. I made a separate bubble. So, hit new composition. Grab a solid. Particle world. And I'm just going to set up most of this before I even bother hitting the play button. Do that. I'll pull this below. Go into my physics, my gravity. I'm probably not going to want a whole lot of gravity. I'm going to change it. I will leave it as explosive for now. Open my particles. Just to see what I'm getting, I'm just going to use a shaded sphere to start with. So let's play that. It's pretty fast. Go to my resistance, dial that up. Increase my longevity. I'm going to drop the birth rate. I really don't need that many bubbles, so like 0.5. See what we get. Okay. I could probably drop my velocity some. Oh, yeah, with gravity, I guess it probably won't have that kind of an effect. Let's lower the gravity a little bit. Even more resistance. Even more on the longevity. All right, we'll go with that. We'll change the birth rate to 0.2. All right. So I got something that's kind of working. Needs some other adjustments, but it's good enough. Like I said, we don't have to use the built-in particles. So I've got one that I built already. I created a bubble. If I open it up, let's go to put it on black. It's actually animated. So the recommendation is that when you're going to add your own asset to the particle system, that you do it through a composition. Even if you build it in Illustrator, you've got a couple of snowflakes you built, you bring them in. It's still a good idea to put them in a composition because you can adjust them a little bit, a little more freely than if you apply just a raw object to it. So this I just created in a composition. It's only a 400 pixel composition. Doesn't even need to be that big, really. But if I play it, it also kind of just animates a little bit, kind of squishes on a loop. I just looped it. So if I come back here, good Lord, is that the one? Good, that's it. So let's back up. Let's go back to our effect controls, grab this, open it up, lock all those out. So instead of shaded sphere, it helps if I got to drop the bubble into my composition, and I need to turn it off. All right, so I got the bubble in there on a layer. Let's go back here. I want to change from shaded sphere to textured quad polygon. And you'll see that it opened up a bunch more options here. Now I'm just going to open up texture. The texture layer is going to be my bubble. If I play it, my bubble's applied to my particle system. But kind of small. It's also doing a weird rotating thing. So we're going to fix all of that too. So let's do, first thing is, I think our birth size should probably be bigger. What do you think? And our depth size could probably be a little bigger yet, maybe. So you see that's particles animated in there. I'm just gonna, it should not have any rotation to it. Initial rotation should be 0. There we are. The rest of it shouldn't matter. And drop the birth size down a little. Maybe we change our longevity to 8. Or less. This is where making the depth size bigger would probably make sense. Only thing I don't like about my animation is that it's very, the animation on the bubble itself is very uniform. So I could probably offset that a little bit, but I don't really care for that part. But I guess the bigger point is that you can use any object you want.
Why aren't the bubbles bunching up and then unbunching back up again? Like as they're floating, it's kind of like they're doing
squishing?
Yeah, squishing.
That's the animation that I added to it. If you take a look at my, if I open my bubble animation, my bubble, that's what he does.
Oh,
Yeah. Say it again?
Is there a way to increase the speed of,
Of the animation of the bubble?
not the depth?
Oh, the,
Like after a certain duration?
right.
Like popping.
There is, make it more like they're popping. I'm sure there is.
bubbles are popping and then they're just vanishing. Oh.
Yeah. I'm thinking the opacity map. Probably the opacity map. Let's play that. Let's see what we get here. They need to be a little more random than that. Yeah, the opacity map you can kind of, or the opacity map you can kind of play with a little bit. Yeah, you still need to adjust the velocity though, which,
Say you want to add back to the opacity map, do you have to hit the Command C button to get back your previous data that you
get back to the way it was.
Or to get back to like,
No.
not necessarily the way it was, but to add to it, like
Right.
suddenly decrease.
Well, you can continue modifying it if you want. But I think it's, let's see, no, but you can get back to the original state of it. I'm trying to remember how. I really wasn't going to talk about the opacity map, but this is fine. And I don't really mess with the opacity map very much, although it's appearing to me like I really should. Because that's actually kind of, that flickering is kind of neat.
Ooh, imagine
but-
with rhinestones, that look
Yeah, kind of sparkly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can, I got to look it up. I don't remember now.
You have to hold option.
I think it might be just option or something to that effect.
Option on the name,
Option and command will let you smooth it out.
The color in the opacity map, is that reflecting the color that's inside the bubble itself?
No, it's just the way for you to tell the difference between transparent and opaque. So, yeah, but you can do that. Yeah, so anyway, and then, I think we could probably change our birth from explosive to maybe do something, maybe do twirl, or that gives a different kind of a look yet, a little different in the way they're born. Yeah, not that one. So anyway, same particle system, did different things with it, got drastically different results. So it's just, really can kind of be the sky's the limit with them, I can see, I've used them for bubbles before and things. I used them for actually this guy. And the 2D one you can actually mask within a shape like this is. But, got some kind of nice movement out of those. It's stylized, so. And then it comes across to the end. And we get a Frosty the Snowman kind of thing going on with the logo reveal. So, those are very stylized, but didn't really. But those are the kinds of things, Sky's kind of the limit, though, especially since you can animate within a particle, If you can get it to where you've only got a few particles on the screen at a time, kind of doing their own thing, you can do a complex kind of animation within those too. So it's just a matter of working with them, really. Like so many things in After Effects, you really just got to kind of work with them, tinker with them, decide to sit down and spend half hour, something like that, exploring, figuring out what it can do, because, and not be afraid to mess stuff up. You mess something up, you make a new composition and you kind of start it over again, you know, or magical Command Z. But we learn more by messing things up than we do by being successful all the time, you know? So it's obviously an integral part of learning. So, but that at least, you know, that at least should get you kind of started, understand what you're looking at there anyway. But it's, you know, you don't even have to know any physics, just know that gravity, air resistance, that kind of stuff affects something just the same way it does in anything else. So, so that's kind of that. Any